The unexpected encounter. The stars glittered in the dark void of space, a vast emptiness stretching beyond what the eye could see. In the middle of this infinite darkness, a small human ship drifted, damaged and helpless. It had been on a routine exploration mission, far from Earth, but an unexpected force had torn through the ship's systems, leaving them stranded in an uncharted star system. Captain John Reynolds stood at the helm of the ship, his face tense with worry. His crew was nervous, their voices low and filled with uncertainty. "We're not going to make it," one of the crew members whispered. As the ship's engine sputtered, the screens flickered and the lights dimmed. The ship was dying, and they were far from home. John stared at the star maps, looking for any sign of life, any planet that could offer shelter. It was then that he saw something on the radar, a signal, faint but clear, a planet, unknown, barely visible in the deep reaches of the galaxy. It was their only hope. "Prepare to land," John ordered, his voice calm but firm. The crew scrambled to follow his command, and within moments, they began their descent toward the unknown world. As the ship broke through the atmosphere, John could see the planet's surface below. It was a barren world, covered in jagged mountains and vast plains, but something about it felt ancient. The ship landed with a jolt, and the crew quickly suited up, ready to explore the mysterious planet. They had no idea what they would find, but they knew they had no choice but to investigate. John led the way, his steps heavy on the ground. The planet was quiet, eerily so. They walked for miles, through rocky terrain and over deep ravines, searching for signs of civilization. It wasn't long before they came across an outpost, hidden among the rocks. It looked old, abandoned, as though it had been here for centuries. "Do you think anyone's still alive here?" one of the crew members asked, his voice full of doubt. "I don't know," John replied, scanning the area. His gut told him something wasn't right, but they had no other options. They needed shelter, and this outpost was their only hope. As they entered the outpost, a strange feeling washed over John. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in strange symbols. He didn't recognize the language, but the markings seemed to pulse with an energy he couldn't explain. "Stay alert," he warned his crew. They all nodded, but there was no hiding the fear in their eyes. They moved deeper into the outpost, following the narrow corridors that twisted and turned like a maze. The further they went, the colder it became. A sense of dread filled the air, yet they couldn't turn back now. Then, in the darkest corner of the outpost, they found her. At first, John thought it was just another artifact, perhaps a statue or some forgotten relic, but as he moved closer, he saw the truth, a figure, a woman, lying unconscious on the cold stone floor. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen before. Her skin was pale, almost silver, and her hair shimmered like liquid gold. Her features were sharp, regal, as if she were a queen, but what struck John the most was the faint glow emanating from her body. "Is she alive?" one of the crew members whispered. "I don't know," John replied, kneeling beside her. His heart raced as he checked for a pulse. To his relief, he felt a faint, steady beat. She was alive, but barely. Without thinking, John reached for his medical kit, his hands moving with practiced precision. He wasn't sure who she was, but in this place, on this forgotten world, she was their only hope. He carefully began treating her wounds, the injuries on her body deep and extensive. It looked like she had been through a battle, one that had nearly cost her life, but as John worked, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her than met the eye. Her eyes flickered open for a brief moment, and John froze. Her gaze locked onto his, intense and powerful. There was no fear, no pain, just a quiet strength that unnerved him. She opened her mouth to speak, but her voice was barely a whisper. "Why did you help me?" she said, her voice low, yet commanding. John hesitated, unsure of how to answer. "You were hurt," he said simply. "I couldn't leave you like this. Whoever you are, you deserve to be safe." She didn't respond at first, but her eyes held his for what felt like an eternity. Then, just as quickly, she closed her eyes again, drifting into unconsciousness. John stood, looking down at the mysterious woman. His heart pounded in his chest. He didn't know who she was, but he had a feeling that this encounter would change everything. The crew gathered around him, all of them staring at the woman with wide eyes. "Who do you think she is?" one of them asked. "I don't know," John admitted, "but I have a feeling we're about to find out." As he stood there, staring at her, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a dangerous decision. but it was too late now. They had saved her, and there was no turning back. The mystery of who this woman was, and what she represented, would soon reveal itself, and it would change the fate of the galaxy forever. The Empress's awakening. The days passed slowly as John and his crew waited for the mysterious woman to regain her strength. The planet was silent, too quiet, with no signs of life anywhere else. It felt as if they were the only ones left in the galaxy, stranded on this forgotten world with no way out. John couldn't stop thinking about her, the woman he had healed. He had watched her for hours, barely breathing as she lay unconscious, but now, something was changing. Every time he checked on her, he felt a faint pulse of energy in the air around her. It was subtle, but undeniable. The closer he got, the more he felt it, a strange, almost magnetic pull that kept him near her. Then, one morning, just as the crew was finishing their routine checks, it happened. The woman stirred, her eyelids fluttering open. For a moment, her gaze was distant, unfocused, but then, as if regaining her senses, she looked directly at John. "You saved me," she said, her voice clear and strong now. Though it was still faint, there was power in it, a calm authority that instantly demanded respect. John stood frozen for a moment, not knowing what to say. You're awake," he finally managed to say. His voice was softer than usual, as if afraid to break the silence that hung in the air between them. The woman, no, the Empress, slowly pushed herself up, her movements graceful, almost predatory, as if every part of her was honed for battle. "I am Zalara," she said, her eyes locking onto his, "and you have made a terrible mistake, human." John's heart skipped a beat. The words sent a chill down his spine. His hands tightened around the medical kit, but he didn't know how to respond. "What do you mean, mistake?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly, though he tried to hide it. Zalara's gaze never wavered as she stood tall. Her posture was regal, but there was something terrifying in the way she held herself. "You don't realize who I am, do you, human?" she asked, her voice colder now, the calm of earlier replaced by something far more dangerous. "I know you're hurt," John said. "I helped you," but even as the words left his mouth, he knew it wasn't enough. There was something more, something far greater than what he could understand. Zalara's lips curled into a faint smile, but there was no warmth in it. "I am the last of the Zyphar," she said. Her words were like a thunderclap in the silence. "The most powerful warriors in the galaxy, but I have been hunted. My enemies have been chasing me for years. Now, they will come for you." John's mind raced. The Zyphar, he had never heard of them, but the way she spoke. It was clear she wasn't lying. Her power, her presence, it was undeniable. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Zalara's eyes softened for a moment, but the hardness returned quickly. "It was not my choice," she replied, "but now, because of you, I am alive, and I will make sure my enemies know it." John didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. He had helped her, saved her life, but now, it seemed like he had awakened a sleeping giant, one that would bring destruction to everything in its path. Before he could say anything else, Zalara turned away, her gaze sweeping over the room. "You are weak," she said, her voice cold again. "Your people, your galaxy, they have no idea what they are up against." John felt a surge of anger, but he quickly suppressed it. He wasn't afraid of her. At least, he tried not to be. "What will you do now?" he asked, his voice steady. Zalara didn't answer immediately. She stood for a moment, as if considering her next move. Finally, she turned back to him. "I will finish what I started," she said. "I will rebuild my empire, and I will take back what is mine, with or without your help." John's thoughts were a whirlwind, his mind racing. He had never asked for any of this. He had only wanted to help, but now, he was in the middle of something much bigger than he could have imagined, a galactic war, with the fate of the universe hanging in the balance. "Why me?" he finally asked. "Why did you let me heal you?" Zalara's gaze softened again, but only for a moment. "Because, human, you are the first to ever see me as something more than a weapon, something more than an empress. You saw me as a person." She stepped closer to him, her presence overwhelming. "And now, you are part of my story, whether you like it or not." John swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He had no idea what was coming next, but he knew one thing for certain. The moment he had healed Zalara, he had set off a chain of events that he couldn't undo. The galaxy would never be the same again, and neither would he. The Empress's choice. The days following Zalara's awakening were tense. The ship was on high alert, its crew uncertain of what to do next. John spent hours with her, learning about her past, about the Sci-Fi Empire, and the enemies who had chased her to the edge of extinction, but no matter how much he learned, it didn't bring him any closer to understanding what he had gotten himself into. Zalara had told him of her people, the Sci-Fi, a race of unmatched warriors, their empire once stretching across hundreds of star systems. They were feared across the galaxy, their enemies falling before them like leaves in a storm, but that was before the war, before the betrayal, before the fall of the Sci-Fi. Now, Zalara was the last of her kind, the last heir to a dying empire, and with her return, her enemies would know no peace. John couldn't help but feel a deep sympathy for her. It was clear she had suffered, far more than anyone should, but he also couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that lingered every time he looked at her. Her power was palpable, a force that thrummed in the air like electricity. John had never met anyone like her. Her gaze alone was enough to send a chill down his spine. She was both terrifying and mesmerizing, beautiful in a way that made him forget to breathe, yet, there was something behind that beauty, something dangerous. One evening, as they stood together on the ship's observation deck, watching the stars whirl past them, John finally found the courage to ask the question that had been on his mind since the moment he'd healed her. "Why did you choose to spare me?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. Zalara's eyes never left the stars, but he could feel her awareness shift toward him. "I didn't choose you," she replied, her voice calm, almost detached. "You chose me, Captain Reynolds. When you decided to save my life, you chose to become part of something far greater than yourself." John's heart skipped a beat. "I didn't ask for this, I didn't even know who you were," he said, his frustration building. I just wanted to help." Zalara turned to face him then, her expression unreadable. "That is the difference between you and the rest of the galaxy, John. You did not see me as a tool to be used, you saw me as a person, and that, above all else, is why I spared you." John's mind raced. He had never expected her to say that. He had never thought of himself as anything special, but now, it seemed like he had become a part of something much larger than he could have ever imagined. "Do you think you can change the galaxy, Zalara?" John asked, his voice quieter now. "Do you think you can rebuild your empire, after everything that's happened?" Zalara's lips curled into a faint smile, but it wasn't one of warmth. "I will not rebuild the Sci-Fi Empire," she said. "That empire is gone, but I will create something new, something stronger, something that will unite the galaxy in ways no one has ever dreamed of." John didn't know how to respond. He was still trying to wrap his mind around what she was saying, but before he could speak, a loud alert blared through the ship. "Captain Reynolds, we have incoming ships, multiple unknown signatures," a voice crackled over the comms. John's blood ran cold. Zalara's eyes flashed with recognition. "They found us," she said simply. "It's time." John turned to her, panic rising in his chest. "Who are they?" he asked, but Zalara was already walking toward the control panel. "They are the remnants of the Sci-Fi's enemies," she said, her voice cold and unwavering, "and they are here to finish what they started." Zalara's fingers flew over the controls, activating the ship's defense systems with practiced ease. "Get ready, John. It's not enough that I'm alive, now they'll come for you, too." John's thoughts raced as he watched her. She was calm, so incredibly calm. While he was on the edge of panic, he had healed her, but now, there was no turning back. "Where do we go now?" John asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. "How do we escape this?" Zalara turned to him, her eyes glinting with a fierce determination. "We don't escape," she said, "we fight, and we win. This is no longer about survival, it's about taking back what was lost, and if you choose to stand with me, you will stand against the galaxy's most powerful forces." John stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. The decision was now his. He had no idea what the outcome would be, but one thing was clear, he had made a choice, and it would change everything. As the enemy ships closed in, John knew that his life, and the fate of the galaxy, were about to change forever. Zalara was the key, the most powerful being in the universe, and together, they would face the storm. The battle for the future. The tension aboard the ship was unbearable. John's mind was a storm of thoughts. The alert systems flashed red as enemy ships closed in on their position. The crew scrambled to prepare, but John could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had never been in a battle like this, nothing that could compare to what was about to happen. Zalara stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the approaching fleet. Her calm demeanor was unsettling. She had faced death countless times, but for John, this was the first time his life was truly in danger. "We need to move fast," Zalara said, her voice steady, as she barked orders to the crew. John watched her work, amazed at the way she commanded the ship with precision and authority. It was as if she had done this 1,000 times before. As he glanced around, he realized just how much power she truly had. This wasn't just about survival for her, this was a war, and she was leading it. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Zalara commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. She didn't seem scared, not at all. She had nothing to lose, and everything to gain. The Sci-Fi had once been the rulers of the galaxy, and now they were on the brink of returning. "We won't survive a full-on attack," John said, his voice strained as he watched the incoming ships. There were at least 10, all larger and more heavily armed than their own vessel, but Zalara didn't flinch. She looked over her shoulder at him, her eyes narrowing with cold focus. "We will," she said simply. "We have something they don't, we have the will to fight." As if on cue, the enemy ships opened fire, laser beams streaking through the blackness of space. John's stomach dropped as the first wave of blasts hit the ship. The vessel shuddered violently, alarms blaring as the hull was torn open. "Shields are holding, but for how long?" the technician shouted, panic in his voice. John gritted his teeth, his heart pounding. He had never felt so helpless in his life. Zalara, however, didn't seem fazed. "Brace for impact," she commanded, her voice unwavering. The ship rocked again, this time harder, and John could hear the sound of metal groaning under the strain. It was a sound he would never forget, but Zalara remained calm, her focus unwavering as she adjusted the ship's trajectory. They were moving, dodging, trying to outmaneuver their attackers, but the enemy was relentless. John watched as Zalara worked, her fingers dancing over the controls with an ease that spoke of years of experience. She was not only a warrior, she was a tactician, calculating every move in the blink of an eye. She wasn't just fighting for survival, she was fighting for something far greater, for her people, her empire, and a future that could not be allowed to slip away. "Captain Reynolds," Zalara called out, her voice commanding, "prepare to fire the weapons systems. I need everything we have." John snapped to attention, his hand gripping the control panel. He had never used the weapons systems before, but with Zalara's guidance, he quickly learned. The ship's weapons were powerful, far more advanced than anything humanity had ever created. "Ready," he called back, "firing now." The first blast from their weapons ripped through the void, striking one of the enemy ships directly. The impact sent the vessel spiraling into the distance, and a cheer erupted from the crew. But Zalara's expression didn't change. She had anticipated this moment, but it was far from over. "They'll come at us harder now," she warned. "We need to take out their command ship. If we don't, this fight is lost." John nodded, his hands trembling as he aimed the ship's weapons at the largest enemy vessel, the one that seemed to be giving orders to the rest. He wasn't sure what would happen next, but he knew one thing. He had made the choice to stand with Zalara, and now, they were in this together. The ship shuddered again as more blasts rang out, but this time, they held steady. John fired, and the beam from their weapon streaked through space, striking the command ship directly. The explosion was massive, tearing the enemy vessel apart in an instant. For a moment, there was silence. The ship rocked gently, the sound of alarms fading as the threat seemed to dissipate, but Zalara's eyes never left the view screen, her gaze scanning the debris, calculating. "Don't celebrate yet," she said, "there's more coming. They'll regroup, and we'll have only moments before they launch a counterattack. We need to move, now." John's heart sank. He couldn't believe they were still alive, but Zalara wasn't finished. She never stopped fighting, never stopped planning, even as victory seemed within reach. "Where do we go now?" John asked, his voice steady despite the chaos. Zalara's lips curled into a faint smile, but it was not one of happiness. "We go to them," she said, her voice fierce. "We show them that the Sci-Fi are not dead. We show them that the galaxy will never be the same again." As the ship accelerated into the void, John realized that this battle was just the beginning. The war for the galaxy had only just started, and Zalara had already set her sights on victory. But the price of this victory would be high, and John was now caught in the middle of a war that would change everything. The cost of war. The aftermath of the battle left the crew shaken, but they were alive. Against all odds, they had survived the first wave of the attack, and for now, the ship was safe. Yet, despite the victory, there was no celebration, no relief. The war had only just begun. John stood at the command center, staring out at the vast emptiness of space, his mind still racing, still processing everything that had happened. Zalara had been right. Once the command ship fell, the enemy had retreated, but John knew that wouldn't last. They would be back, and when they returned, they would come harder. Zalara entered the command center, her presence immediately drawing attention. Her eyes were focused, distant, as though she was already thinking 10 steps ahead. Her calm, unshakable confidence was both comforting and terrifying. "Captain," she said, her voice firm but calm, "we need to prepare. The enemy will not let us rest. They will regroup and strike again. We must be ready." John turned to face her, his throat dry. "How do we prepare for something like this? How do we stand against an entire fleet?" Zalara looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "We don't stand against them, Captain. We strike first. We take the fight to them. We show them that we will not cower, that we will not be destroyed." John's heart skipped a beat. He knew she was a warrior, but this was something different. "You mean we're going to attack them, on their home ground?" Zalara's lips curled into a smile, though it was tinged with something darker. "Yes, they think we're weak. They think they've already won. But we will turn that perception around. We will show them the true power of the Xyphar." John couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had been following orders all his life. But this was something else. Zalara wasn't just leading a rebellion, she was starting a war, and this time, there would be no going back. "What's the plan?" John asked, his voice low. Zalara's eyes narrowed as she looked at the star charts on the display. "We have a few allies in the galaxy, people who will back us if we strike first, but it's a risk, a huge risk. If we move against them now, we'll either win or be destroyed." John swallowed hard. "And if we win?" "If we win," Zalara said, her voice steady, "we will take the galaxy back. We will show them that the Xyphar are not gone, that we will rise again." The crew had gathered around the command center, watching the exchange. Their faces reflected a mix of fear and anticipation. They had no idea what they were getting into, but they knew one thing: they had already crossed the point of no return. "Prepare the ship," Zalara commanded. "We leave in an hour. I want every crew member ready for battle. The enemy will expect us to be weak, to be scattered, but we will hit them where it hurts." John felt a lump form in his throat. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this, but when he looked at Zalara, he saw nothing but determination, nothing but the cold, hard resolve of someone who had already lost everything and had nothing left to lose. The hour passed in a blur of activity. As the crew scrambled to prepare for what was to come, weapons were checked, shields were powered up, and the final preparations were made. As they made their way toward the enemy's last known position, John couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about winning, it was about something far bigger, something Zalara had been fighting for her entire life, a chance to rebuild, to reclaim what was lost. "Are we really going to do this?" John asked quietly as he stood beside Zalara in the command center. She turned to him, her eyes meeting his. "We don't have a choice, Captain. They will never stop hunting us, until we show them what happens when you underestimate the Xyphar." John looked at her, his mind still racing, but now, more than ever, he understood. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a battle for the future of the galaxy, and Zalara was the key to it all. The moment the ship entered the enemy's territory, John could feel the shift in the air. The tension was unbearable. The crew was ready, but there was a sense of dread hanging over them. They were about to face their greatest challenge yet. And as they made their way deeper into the heart of enemy space, Zalara's voice cut through the silence. "We don't fight for revenge, we fight for our future, we fight for our people, and we fight for everything that has been stolen from us." John nodded, his resolve solidifying. "Let's show them who we are." With that, they launched into the heart of the enemy's fleet, prepared to do whatever it took to win. but John knew one thing for sure: there would be no turning back now. The galaxy was about to change, and everything they had fought for was about to come to a head. The first shot fired, and with it, the war for the galaxy's future began. The Eye of the Storm. The ship surged through the endless expanse of space, its engines roaring as they sped toward the heart of enemy territory. The crew was tense, their faces lit by the glow of the control panels as they prepared for the biggest battle of their lives. The quiet before the storm was unbearable, the weight of the mission heavy on every breath they took. John stood beside Zalara, watching the stars blur past them. His mind was a whirl of conflicting thoughts. Just a few days ago, he had been an ordinary captain on an exploration mission, never dreaming that he would be standing on the edge of an intergalactic war. But now, with Zalara at his side, he felt the pull of something much greater than himself. There was no turning back. "We're almost there," Zalara said, her voice as cold and steady as ever. She didn't look at him, but John could feel her eyes on him, a constant reminder of the stakes they were facing. "I know," John replied, his voice tight. "What happens next?" Zalara's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't one of comfort or reassurance, it was the smile of a seasoned warrior ready to face her enemy. "We fight," she said simply, her voice carrying the weight of countless battles fought and won. "We remind them that the Zyphar are not dead. We remind them that no one can destroy us." As she spoke, the ship's alarms suddenly blared, their shrill sound cutting through the tension like a blade. The enemy had found them. The first wave of enemy ships appeared on the radar, and John's heart sank. The fleet was massive, stretching as far as the eye could see. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmatched. "Brace for impact," Zalara commanded. Her voice didn't falter, even as the enemy ships closed in. "We hit them fast and hard. No hesitation. We strike with everything we've got." The crew moved swiftly, carrying out their orders with a quiet professionalism that came from years of training, but even they knew the odds were against them. John's hands gripped the control panel as he watched the enemy fleet grow larger on the view screen. His mind raced. Could they really pull this off? The ship rocked as the first wave of laser blasts hit. The hull groaned under the pressure, but the shields held strong. John's pulse raced as he looked to Zalara for guidance. She was calm, calculating, as if she had already seen this battle play out 1,000 times. "Fire," she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. John hesitated for just a moment, then pushed the button to fire their weapons. The ship's weapon systems unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, striking the nearest enemy ships with terrifying precision. Explosions lit up the dark void of space as enemy vessels were torn apart, but there were so many more. The battle was only just beginning. Zalara moved like a force of nature, her fingers dancing across the control panel with ease, directing their ship through a series of evasive maneuvers that left the enemy scrambling to adjust. "Keep them off our back," she ordered. "I need a clear shot at their command ship." John followed her instructions, his hands moving automatically, but his mind was spinning. The battle was chaotic, a whirlwind of explosions, lasers, and broken metal. It felt like the ship was in constant motion, dodging, weaving, and retaliating against a seemingly unstoppable onslaught. As Zalara had predicted, the enemy regrouped quickly, launching another wave of ships. This time, they came at them from multiple angles, forcing John and his crew to work in tandem like never before. But Zalara didn't flinch. She remained in control, her focus unwavering as she guided their ship through the storm. "We can't keep this up," John said, his voice tense with urgency. "There's too many of them. We're running out of time." Zalara glanced at him, her eyes fierce with determination. "We don't need time, Captain. We need precision." Her voice was a command, but there was something else in it, an unspoken promise. A promise that no matter the odds, she would see this through. "Target their engines," she shouted. "Take out their ability to regroup." John nodded, setting his sights on the largest enemy vessel, its massive form looming in front of them. The ship's weapons fired again, and with a deafening blast, the enemy's engines exploded. The ship drifted, powerless, as the rest of the fleet scrambled to adjust. But the battle wasn't over. Not yet. Zalara's face hardened. "Now we finish this," she said, her voice low and steady. "All or nothing." John felt a surge of adrenaline rush through him. There was no more room for mistakes. With a single command, Zalara sent their ship into the heart of the enemy fleet, weaving through blasts and debris as they moved in for the final strike. They had no choice but to risk everything. If they failed, it would be their last battle. But if they succeeded, they would send a message across the galaxy, a message that the Zyphar were back, and they were unstoppable. The final barrage of energy blasts fired from their ship, targeting the heart of the enemy command. John held his breath, watching as the beams cut through space, slamming into the heart of the fleet. Explosions erupted in all directions, and for a moment, there was only silence. Then, the radio crackled to life, the voice of one of their crew members breaking the stillness. "Captain, we did it. The enemy's fleet is retreating." John's heart pounded in his chest. They had won. Against all odds, they had done it. The enemy had been pushed back, their command ship destroyed, and the message had been sent: the Zyphar were not done. They would not be erased. Zalara turned to John, her eyes glinting with cold satisfaction. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice calm but filled with an unmistakable fire. "We've only made our first move. The galaxy will remember us." John looked out at the wreckage of the battlefield, knowing that this victory had come at a great cost, but also understanding that it was only the start of something much larger. The galaxy had been shaken, and the Zyphar were rising once again. The war for the galaxy had truly begun. The tides of destiny. The aftermath of the battle felt surreal. The remnants of the enemy fleet drifted silently in the void, their shattered forms testimony to the ferocity of the fight. The crew of John's ship had won, but victory came at a price. The ship was damaged, and several crew members had been injured during the skirmish. The air was thick with the scent of burned metal and ionized atmosphere, the sharp taste of victory mixed with the bitter realization that the war was far from over. John stood on the bridge, his gaze fixed on the stars outside. His hands were still trembling from the adrenaline, his mind racing with everything that had happened in the last few days. What started as a simple rescue mission had turned into something unimaginable. Now, he wasn't just a captain of a spaceship, he was part of a galactic conflict, caught between ancient empires, deadly enemies, and a warrior who was far more than human. Zalara stood beside him, her expression unreadable as she watched the remains of the enemy fleet fade into the distance. Her cold, calculating demeanor never wavered. She had led them into battle, and now she was already planning the next step. "Captain," Zalara said, her voice calm but filled with purpose. "The first wave is only the beginning. We've dealt a blow, but our enemies will regroup, and they will come for us again. This war will spread across the galaxy." John turned to her, his brow furrowed. "How many more battles do we have ahead? How do we prepare for what's coming?" Zalara's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "The galaxy doesn't understand what's coming," she said, her voice cold and determined. "But I will make them understand. I will take back what was stolen from us, from me. The Zyphar are not just warriors. We are the pulse of the galaxy. The galaxy will bend to our will, or it will break." John couldn't help but feel a shiver run down his spine. There was no doubt in his mind that Zalara was capable of achieving whatever she set her mind to. The power that radiated from her was almost overwhelming. He had seen it in action on the battlefield, the sheer strength, the unrelenting determination. But what would be the cost of this war? How many more lives would be lost before it was all over? How do we even begin to unite the galaxy after everything that's happened? John asked, his voice full of skepticism. "How can you restore an empire when everyone has turned against you?" Zalara's gaze was unwavering. "I don't need to unite everyone," she replied, her voice cutting through the air with certainty. "I need to create a force strong enough to make them listen. And I will. They think we are a lost race, a forgotten empire. But they don't realize the truth. Our power isn't gone, it's just waiting to be unleashed. This galaxy is built on the ashes of the Zyphar. And now, we will rise from those ashes." John nodded slowly, trying to process her words. She wasn't just speaking of battle. She was speaking of domination, of reshaping the galaxy in the image of the Zyphar. It was a vision that felt both terrifying and awe-inspiring. But as the ship moved further into uncharted space, John felt the weight of what lay ahead. Zalara wasn't just a ruler seeking to reclaim her throne. She was a force of nature, a leader who would stop at nothing to achieve her goals. And in the wake of her ambition, there would be no room for hesitation, no room for second chances. "We'll need allies," John said, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. "You can't do this alone. There are other factions, other races in the galaxy. We need to form alliances, build a coalition." Zalara looked at him, her expression still unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. "I know," she said quietly. "And I will. But we don't have the luxury of time. If we wait, we will lose our momentum. We take action now. We make them fear us." John didn't know if he could follow her vision to the end. He didn't know if he could stomach the consequences of the war that was unfolding. But there was something in Zalara's conviction that made him question everything he thought he knew about morality, justice, and survival. Was the galaxy truly ready for the Zyphar to rise again? Could they endure the storm that Zalara was about to unleash? As the ship moved deeper into the unknown, John found himself at the center of a brewing storm, one that would change the very fabric of the galaxy. Zalara's mission was clear: take back what was lost, restore the Zyphar Empire, and make the galaxy bow before them. The galaxy had been warned. It was only a matter of time before they felt the full weight of Zalara's wrath. John took a deep breath and looked at Zalara once more. He was a captain, a leader in his own right. But he was also a man caught in a war that wasn't his own. He had crossed a line, and there would be no turning back. The choices he made now would define the galaxy's future. The first battle was won, but the war had just begun. And in the depths of space, the tides of destiny were shifting.